I hope you say hi. If you haven't stepped in here before, I'm Leslyn. Nice to meet you. I'm a therapist by day, and I just kind of hang out here and answer questions and all that good stuff. You know, I'm, I'm kind of plagued by a question that came up in my live last Thursday. I think it was last Thursday when somebody asked if I could talk about parental alienation. And parental alienation meaning that kids disconnect from their parents. And you know, when I say I'm kind of plagued by it, I know people, you know, even in my family, who have no communication with their parents. And hello, Italian Posh. And it's often the subject of people who come and talk to me. You know, they say, I'm having a really hard time with this relationship, or my kid doesn't talk to me, or my mother doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And as a mom, I have 4 kids, and I can't imagine the pain of that. And so as a mom, I think, oh my gosh, what happened? Why is that the case? As a therapist, I hear probably every week, like this person that I was talking about from this morning, that person grew up with the hello radar with a mother who was, in his perspective, horrific, right? Now, I'm sure in her mind, she was as good of a mom as she knew how to be. She probably believed that she was great to see you too. She probably believed that she was doing the best that she could, but it was abusive. The things that she did were abusive. And it wasn't overt abuse, but it was really, I'll say, kind of rigid thinking abuse. And so I've recommended that he keep it very low contact, because it's not healthy. She won't engage in conversation, and it's not healthy for him to have communication with her. So when you're a parent and you're so rigid that your child, or if you're the child who is so rigid that you can't find a way to be respectful of the adult boundaries that each of you have, then why would somebody want to come around? You know, I think to myself, if my friends came with their kids and their kids ran around the house and got into all of the cabinets, I wouldn't invite my friend over. Why should I let somebody else's kids do that just because they're family members? For example, I saw something in the news about parents who won't take their shoes off when they go to their kid's house. So anyway, I try not to make any of this about right and wrong. I try to make sure that I help people understand that you need to foster a conversation that's not about right and wrong, that you're both just looking for mutual respect. You only have contact with parent if you call. Parent only call if they need something. That's really unfortunate. You know, and I think it's necessary to set boundaries. And I'm not suggesting that all parents are healthy or all kids are healthy. You know, I tell parents, if your child's a heroin addict, you have to set a boundary, and it might mean no contact. I worked with a client years and years ago whose son had developed a gambling problem and stole all kinds of money, told fibs, lies, to family, friends, and other relatives. And ultimately, that addiction became the rigid thing in their relationship. And the parents went no contact because the child with the addiction, the adult child with the addiction, had no regard for any of the boundaries and was not living an honest life. And it's so sad, it's so tragic when that kind of thing happens. But that's what boundaries look like, and that's what boundaries mean. My best friend has 3 daughters who all cut her out of their lives, and the grandkids. Yeah. It's so hard to understand if you don't know what their point of view is, and what their understanding and perception is. It's so hard. It's such a hard place to be. I always think maybe I'm wrong. Is it parents born from the 40s so they don't show their feelings? Well, that's certainly a possibility. The truth is every generation has an idea of what respect looks like. Every generation has an idea of what right and wrong is. And this is why I said earlier that we have to eliminate the concept of right and wrong. I can still hear my grandfather screaming at my aunt, my younger aunt. She wasn't younger than me, but she was the youngest of the family. Turn that bullshit off. You're going to go to hell listening to rock and roll. She was listening to the Beatles. And I can remember him screaming that up the stairs. I was so scared of him. I was little, I think she was 11 years older than me. So I was maybe 6 or 7. And he was as rigid and as authoritarian as they come, because that's what everybody did back in the day. And so that would have been, she grew up in the 50s. And then my parents were less authoritarian, but my mother grew up in that environment. And so she had all kinds of demons or battles in her mind. My dad was the baby of 13 kids. He had his own demons. His mother was a trip. So then they got together and they parented very, I would say they were authoritative, but my mother didn't have a clue what a boundary even looked like. And so it is really interesting. And if you think about each maybe generation as a separate culture, sometimes it's easier to understand that, oh my gosh, my parents came from an entirely different culture than I did. And today, my children live in an entirely different culture than the one I grew up in. And what's really important, I think, of course, is that we've learned so much more about the psyche, the human mind, growth and development, emotional distress. It used to be you just sucked everything up, stuffed it away, put it in a box, and that doesn't happen now. And so I think it's, there's just so many things happening that when we talk about parenting, we have to sit back and reevaluate the way that we're doing it. It's been difficult not talking about your grandkids to her 10 years. I finally started sharing your grandkids with her. That's really sweet of you, Tuesday. It is hard. I have a friend who, we both have 3 daughters, and her daughters are not like my daughters. My daughters are I would say, very, very close to me, and hers are not so much. But I can also tell you that we raised them very, very differently. And if you show me parent and a child who don't get along, there's a couple of very key distinctions. One is authoritarian parenting. And that's one of the biggest reasons that people don't want to have anything to do with their parents, that the rules and the boundaries were too rigid, and the authoritarian element was experienced as quote unquote abusive. And I use the air quotes because sometimes it was literal and sometimes it was perceived. So that's number one. Number two, there are parents and children who don't have relationships because they were too permissive. They went all the way to the other side. And so the children grew up believing their parents didn't give a shit, and they essentially raised themselves. And so now they don't have any respect or regard for how that parent failed to raise them. So those are, in terms of parenting styles, they're kind of two extremes, right? The other thing that's really common is when a parent has an addiction. And it can be an addiction, and I'm going to say an addiction or mental health disorder, because it's bipolar is sometimes like this, certainly borderline personality, narcissistic personality disorder, mental health disorders and addiction prevent a parent from expressing love in a way that's able to be received. So I've worked with enough of those people that tell me how much they love their children, and frankly, I believe them. But what it's also very, very clear is those people either had a very unhealthy understanding of what love looked like, and or their mental health disorder or addiction prevented them from expressing love in a way that it was able to be received. And it's tragic, really, because, you know, so many of us grow up with this idea that if you loved me, you would blank, blank, blank. And as children, we have an expectation that our parents take care of us. We didn't ask to come into the world. You know, I love that quote that two people got drunk and hooked up and here I am, right? And it's a funnier quote than that. But here I am because two people decided it would be okay to let their little eggs go swimming together. And so consequently, some people who are totally unprepared to have children. Some people who have an incapability of expressing care effectively have children. And it's probably in my opinion, one of the most egregious parts of our culture, right? And of our society of life, maybe of life, that people come into this world and they're given such challenging circumstances literally from the moment they arrive. And it feels very unfair. But having said all that, if you are new here, you will learn that I just take these tangents and go all over the place. So going back to these parents, right? And so lots and lots of us grow up with parents like this. And some of those parents will put the work in to become better people and better humans and learn. I spoke to somebody tonight who said he was raised by a single mom and never learned how to be a dad. And he's doing what he knows, but he needs to learn a few more things. And I give him so much credit for being open to hearing that, because I know lots of people who say, this is not my problem. I'm fine with who I am, and these kids need to grow a few and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh boy. You know, when I get a dad like that in my office, or mom, because it's not all men, all I can do is, because if they don't see a reason to change, then I'm not going to work on them. All I can do is help the teenager, because I don't work with little kids, but I help the teenager or the adult. You know, sometimes they're adults with parents like that. The election and the pandemic brought a lot of that out of the woodwork. But all I can do is that for the teenagers, I say, what is your ticket? What is your ticket out of this house? It's high school. It's high school. It's grades. You need to get the grades to get into a college, to get out of your house, because you are not supporting yourself making $9 an hour at McDonald's. You're probably not going to support yourself even making $15 an hour mowing lawns for a landscape company. And while those are amazing contributions to our society, they're not going to support you by in and of themselves. And so it's encouraging these kids to just put their head down. And I keep in mind, the youngest kid I work with is like 15 years old. So if I have an adult in my office who has a parent who's saying, somebody made a comment in one of my videos last week, I think they said that their mother-in-law made the comment that that's my granddaughter. That's my, and I'm like, okay. I need to reply to that. It's like, okay, but that gives you no say. In some states, it'll give her a right to visitation if she follows through with a suit, but it gives you no say in how the child is raised. None. Being a grandparent does not entitle you to how the child is raised, unless you want to. I'm not an attorney, so I'm sure that there are exceptions to that rule, but I would tell you as a grandmother that that is the single worst mistake that somebody can make. If you want access to your grandkids, you have to respect their parents, as long as the parents are not hurting their kids, right? And then I guess you could get into all kinds of questions about, well, my son's not doing a good job, or my daughter's not doing, the woman he married isn't doing a good job, because I hear it all. And I say back off. Just, they have a right, it's their child, they have a right to choose how that child gets raised, and as long as the child's physical and emotional well-being is not in danger, it's their job. And we have to be respectful of that. You don't have to go home and say that you like it, but you sure as heck can't go to their house and say you don't like it, because you're not going to get invited back. By the way, if this is pertaining to anybody that you know, eliminate right and wrong and eliminate the word should. And if you can do that, you stand a good shot at being able to communicate in an effective way. You know, the first grandkid, I had holes in my tongue because I thought, I am not doing what my mother did. My mother shoulded me to death. You know, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, they should have that, they should be here. And I'm like, oh my God, Mom, be quiet. I am the oldest of 7 children. I watched you, number one. Number two, this is my kid, and you know, Rocky and I, or my partner and I, are the ones that have the say. It's not just me, it's him too. And number three, We're not in Kansas anymore, chickie. This is 1985. So I'm sure that that's what all of the young moms are thinking, right? Lily, verbal abuse is anything that feels disrespectful, ugly, demeaning. I have videos on this. You need to go back maybe to this summer, and I've got lots of videos on verbal abuse. Didn't have grandparents notice. Your brother and I had a lot of babysitters. That's another thing. Babysitters, for some people, that's great. I went to daycare. I had lots of people who loved me, blah, blah, blah. And for other people, they become very resentful of that. Oh, Cody, why did your father choose alcohol? I'm sorry. I'll tell you what I tell my children. People with addictions. So let me put this glass down because I drink wine when I do this. All right. People with addictions, I believe that they love their family. And the family is out here. And they see the family until the addiction is active. And then the addiction is like this theater curtain that just closes in, and it closes out all of the things that are behind the curtain. And the only thing that they can see is their need to satisfy that addiction. And they don't see the family. And it's a metaphor, please, for this experience that happens. I've talked to, the truth is I laid in bed having pillow talk with the father of my children for years, believing that at some point I got down into that really vulnerable space where he was able to share all of his hopes and his dreams. And he don't talk to him anymore, but he has addictions. I'll say had addictions. And his need to satisfy those addictions outweighed all of the things that he ever told me he wanted for his life. I don't have addictions, and so it's very challenging for me to comprehend how somebody can totally sacrifice things that they say are important to them. So I'm going to tell you that I don't fully understand. But I also will tell you that I've heard recovering addicts tell me over and over and over again that they saw their family, but they couldn't get to them. They couldn't, like they would run in that direction and they would hit this curtain. And the curtain would wrap around them, the curtain being the addiction. And if any of you are watching Succession, I thought about this last night as I was watching one of the episodes of Succession when Kendall is in this crack house and he's getting high for the first time. He's a recovering addict. And I thought that's what it looks like. That's this resolve to be sober, this resolve to love and to stay focused just totally gets blocked by this curtain that comes down and engulfs. And so, as cliche as it sounds, I hope that you'll hear that it wasn't about you. And that's the sad part. It was so much about them. Addiction is a disease, and one can say it's a selfish disease, and it's it's often comorbid with other mental health disorders, depression, narcissism, etc., etc. And I'm not making excuses in any way, shape, or form, but I am trying to explain how I understand what happens in that space because you are about the 10,000th person who has said to me, why couldn't my parent love me enough? And I just don't think it's about loving enough. Maybe for a few people. But I think for the majority of people, it's they think that I don't think addicts think they're doing the right thing. I think when they're sober, they know they're not doing the right thing, but the addiction is like the curtain. But many of the other people, like the workaholics and the people who are distant or the people who are harsh, they think they're doing the right thing. So Cody, I hope that helps you. I know it doesn't take away the pain for sure, but sometimes understanding is the beginning of learning how to let go of feeling like it was you. It's hard to process the anger around it. It is. Willpower is a diminishing asset. You know, Sam, I think it's important. You're not wrong about that, I don't think. But I think it's important to understand that disease isn't about willpower. It's literally about the brain being wired differently. And I think it's so easy to, when you don't have that affliction, it's so easy to say it's just willpower. But I don't see it that way anymore. I probably did at one point. Today I see it as pain. People don't want to lose everything. They really don't. But this curtain that comes down, this curtain wraps them up and helps them feel safe because there's so much pain between, like they go over a bridge of pain to get from where they are to the things they love. They have to walk through this fire of shame or whatever other metaphor makes sense. And when that curtain comes down, it offers this security and this safety and this comfort and distraction in a way that says, I don't have to feel the pain. And I would love to think that as a society, we can get to a place where we can really see that all of that ugliness that's out there is a result of pain. I think it's getting better. I think we're getting closer. But it's always a result of pain. And you know, what pains you may not pain me, and vice versa. And that's why it makes it so hard. Because in order for us to see other people in their pain, we have to be willing to see beyond what we know. Now I'm just getting deep. The realm of the hungry ghost. Ooh. Dr. Gabor Ma is spot on his stance in that. I haven't read his stance on, I don't know his stance on addiction. The Realm of the Hungry Ghost. I'm going to have to go read that. I love him. And thank you for that, Jennifer. Finding the right therapist is the hardest. I know. You know, the book changed your life. Good. In terms of finding a therapist, you're right. You know, Mama, one of the things that I want to recommend is, so you know what, and I haven't tried this, and I'm not getting paid for them, but Sondermind reached out to me to work with them, and it looks like they're kind of a better help, but they take insurance. And so they find, you have to answer a bunch of questions. They find the therapist for you, I guess, that's based on a fit in your state, that's licensed and everything. Look it up. It's called, I wish they would reach out to me because I would love to promote them. It's called Sondermind, Sondermind. Pretty sure it's a virtual therapy platform. I have no idea what anything else about it, but it does say that they do all the insurance filing. So you just give them your insurance information and you don't have to worry about it, which is such a godsend for people like me. And if Sondermind reached out to me or somebody, I mean, I guess if I worked with them, it would just open the door for people to be able to pay me or to get insurance. Like they pay me, Sondermind pays me, and then they do the insurance collection. So I don't know how that all changes, but anyway, it seemed really interesting. I don't have any space in my schedule, so I can't take that kind of client experience at this point. But it does open the door if I decide that I want to move away from my practice, which is, I wouldn't move away from my practice. I would just take my practice completely virtual, which is really starting to become appealing to me. But Mama, check that out because it may offer you an opportunity to kind of screen some people and finding a therapist if you don't mind doing virtual therapy. I know that so many people want to try to meet the person first, but honestly, I'm down to 1 day a week in the office because everybody wants to stay virtual. So I think that's a good, Mama, I think that that's a good recommendation to take your time. It can be a pain in the ass to experiment a little bit. And I'll tell you what I tell everybody else. Go to psychologytoday.com, put in your zip code. Now keep in mind that you can search, especially for virtual therapy, you can search the entire state. It doesn't just have to be an area code around or a diameter around your location. It can be anywhere in the state. And look for a face that you like. And I know that that sounds really shallow, but there's a fair amount of research that faces are important to our levels of trust. So look for a face that you like. And then read the little blurb that they have in Psychology Today. And if you like the way they talk, because most of us have, you know, kind of a little blip there about what we believe, what we think about or talk about, the kind of therapy that we do. Yes, thank you. Thank you guys. Psychologytoday.com. You can also filter out, like, do you want a man, a woman, somebody who takes your insurance, somebody who does virtual therapy, and you can do people who are in person too. And then if you like that blip, schedule a session. Ask them if they'll, send an email and say, will you do like a free 15-minute intro session just so we can see if this is a good fit. Yes, Vanilla Princess, all of the therapists that are on there are licensed. Psychology Today verifies licensure. So all of the therapists on Psychology Today will be licensed professionals. Whether or not they have specialties will be listed. If you look at mine, I think I have mine listed for grief, anxiety, and couples, just because those are the things that I can do blindfolded. Only have one male physician. Yeah, you can, you have to feel safe. Absolutely. And you can search for just women, but I would definitely just look at the faces. By the way, I've had so many people tell me how this helped. So look at the faces, connect with a face first, then read their little blip, And if it sounds like somebody that you'd like to talk to, then reach out to them, send them an email. You can do it right from that page and just say, I saw your profile. I'd love an opportunity to see if we're a good fit. Are you open to a free 15-minute session? Or what is your cost for an introductory session? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you like my face? Oh my gosh, thanks, Whimsy. Yeah, I mean, names can be important too, right? Because we all have perceptions about names. Like, there is no way in hell I could have chosen a therapist with the name of Angela. For Christ's sake, I couldn't even talk to a client who came to me with that name for probably 5 years. Angela being my sister's name. And if you don't know the story, just hop on back in my content and it'll be your reading material for the night, or your drama for the day. Your PTSD is virtual. It took some time to feel comfortable. Jeannie, are you doing EMDR virtually for your PTSD? I've wondered how that's working for people. Isn't it interesting? I think it's so interesting how many people, okay, not yet, how many people have thought that they would never do this thing virtually, and yet we have people working virtually now. We have people doing therapy virtually now. Like 3 years ago, if you had asked me how many of my clients were going to go virtual, I would have said none of them. They won't do that. And here we are. So I think that's pretty cool. That's right. That's right. When you're desperate for therapy, you'll take it. And to be honest, most of my clients, so many of them, it certainly, in my opinion, beats doing therapy in a mask. And I mean, I've never asked anybody to wear a mask in my office. I do think that it would be challenging to do some kinds of therapy virtually. Like if somebody was having a panic attack, I would feel like I'd have to, I think I could probably do it, but I do miss the opportunity to say, I wish I could give you a hug. Because sometimes when you're doing a session, people they just need a hug before they leave. The book Whole Again, You Fit the CPS. Many of us fit CPTSD. With no, not to diminish what you're going through. But please, so many people need to remember that it is just this time in history, really just the last 5 or so years, maybe 10 years, that when I was in grad school 15 years ago, PTSD was a new diagnosis. EMDR was an experimental treatment 15 years ago. So I think it's really important to remember that what we're learning about emotions and mental health is new. And it's new in the sense that we're just now really getting the technology that allows us to validate all these hypotheses that have been coming out over the last 30 years. And there's so many more amazing people studying psychology and doing the research. And so things like a parent's divorce can be a small t trauma. Being bullied on the playground can be a small t trauma. Your birth can be a small t trauma. And when we understand that and you start piling one on right after another, then you've got CPTSD, right? And what's really fascinating is your parents' divorce might not have been traumatic at all, but mine could have been horrific. I would argue that my parents' divorce was horrific, but what people told me was, you're such a big girl, you're gonna do fine. New school, you're gonna do fine. Your mom left, you're gonna do fine. You're such a big girl, we're so proud of you. You're living with an aunt you never met before. Oh, and your dad left you there, this woman you never met before. You're not an orphan, you're gonna do fine. And then, hey JJ, and then, so over and over again, and I'm not alone. I mean, y'all probably had much of that happen to you as well. Some of us developed resiliency earlier than others. Some of us had healthy parents to help us close the loop on that, and then others did not. I talked about this last week, and I'm going to talk about it again, because if you're a parent, this is really important. It's not that that shit isn't going to keep happening. Of course it's going to keep happening. People are going to get divorced. Parents are going to get overwhelmed and frustrated. We're going to scream at our kids. We're going to, send them to bed when they're hungry. They're going to be up there screaming, I hate you. Your reaction is what will matter. The parent's reaction will determine whether or not that turns into a trauma for that child. And I cannot emphasize that more. As a parent, your responsibility is to allow for emotional processing and close the loop of the processing. And what that looks like is comfort, empathy. Oh my gosh, I know how much this hurts. I know how frustrating this is. I know you're really sad. But this is a boundary that mommy and daddy set, and we're not playing around here. We love you, but this is the rule. I know you're really hurt. I know how frustrated you are. And I had a client call about their 5-year-old and how the 5-year-old, well, it was kind of a long story, but the 5-year-old was throwing a screaming temper tantrum in their bedroom. The parent was getting completely overstimulated and just felt like, oh my God, I can't, what am I doing? I can't manage this. And so they called and I said, it's okay. You need to breathe. Take a couple of deep breaths. We did a couple of deep breaths and I said, you need to go up there. You do not give in. But giving in doesn't mean being an asshole or not giving in. So you go upstairs. Yes, go in the room. You sit on the edge of the bed. You try to bring the child in. And you breathe. And it's going to be okay. I'm here. It's going to be fine. I know that you're really overwhelmed right now. Go ahead and just cry it out. Calm the child down. I want my blah, blah, blah. Honey, we're not going to get that tonight. That's not what we do. You broke the rule. Here's the consequence. And they go all up again. And then you do the same process. And if you need to step out so that you can compose yourself again, you're the adult. Ugh. I get so frustrated with that. Anyway, that's the process. When the parents don't close the loop, when the parents leave the loop open, the emotional processing loop open, it turns into small t trauma. It's really that simple. And I'm not saying it's the parent's fault, because that's not the way it was done back in the day for most of us, for a lot of us. And some parents are incapable of emotionally processing their own emotions, let alone helping us process ours. So it becomes super problematic. But I would tell you that easily, when I look at the number of couples that I work with, easily half of them, in half of them, at least one of the partners probably has some CPTSD that they are reacting from. And the work is to figure out what those emotions are and to close the loop. I saw that you asked a question about how can I stop wanting my narcissist. Hi, Natalie. I hope you're still here. I want you to search Guy Winch. I think it's WYNCH. He has a TED Talk called Emotional First Aid, I believe, and maybe that might be the name of his book. But it's Dr. Guy Winch, G-Y Winch, and he wrote a book about this kind of, the whole book is called Emotional First Aid, but his TED Talk is about kind of this very thing. It's about a breakup and how we somehow, after a breakup, we only allow ourselves to remember the good times. And it creates this inequity in our perception of what really happened. And remember, when you're with a narcissist, you're often getting gaslit. So you're coming out of that narcissistic relationship believing that you don't know your own mind anyway. And so on top of this doubt and lack of self-confidence that you're experiencing, you start remembering all of the amazing times. And with a narcissist, all of that love bombing is your memory. And it's very possible that you could have been addicted to the love bombing, right? Because that felt like attention. And if you're codependent, which a lot of the people who are attracted to narcissists are codependent, then that love bombing was satisfying something inside of you. And so we kind of think about that as attraction when it's not really, but it looks like attraction, and then we can't stop wanting to have those good things back. So Guy Winch has a little bit of a solution for that, or a band-aid for that. And essentially what he says is, it needs to be your job to remember, to close your eyes and remember every single time you suffered in that relationship, because you have to balance that perspective that's so skewed. And that worked for me really, really well. One of the things that was true about my relationship was he made a lot of money and we had a very good life. And I struggled financially when I left that marriage. And, there were times, well, first I was really pissed that my sister was benefiting from the frickin' money that our company was making when I cooked hamburger for 10 years so that we could turn it into something, but I'm not bitter about that. But I remember thinking maybe I could have put up with it. Maybe I could have tolerated it. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe it was, and I went right down that road. And so I started remembering all of this stuff. And then I realized that there wasn't enough money in the world that would urge me or convince me to go back into that space where I was so little, right? Not because I was little, but because I had to be little in order to be with him. And that I couldn't teach that to my daughters. One day I just knew that it had to end, that I could not allow my daughters to learn that. And it was that easy. It was like a switch went off finally, and it was done. So Guy Winch, emotional first aid. You're learning about you and boundaries and growing. You know, I had a coaching client recently spend an entire session asking me about me, which I personally am okay with, because I mean, that's why I became a therapist, right? And so she said, and I knew that her story was setting up very similarly to the one I had. And so I shared with her, because she needs to get out. She really does. She needs to get out. And I shared with her the trajectory of that decision-making process that I experienced. And I think it was super motivating and encouraging. And so this sharing, the reason I brought that up is because this sharing that you're doing, I think it's really beneficial. There is such a unity in the experience of sharing our growth. And I want to encourage you to do that no matter where you are. So for those of you who don't know, I have a retreat, a women's retreat, scheduled for the first weekend of May. It's going to focus on self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-love. And that's the foundation of growing. And so I want to encourage you to take a look at it. The link is in my bio. I have to have enough deposits by the end of the month to cover the Airbnb. If I don't get them, I'm going to cancel the retreat. And I'll just try again in September. Maybe it'll be a different place, because the Airbnb is pricey, and I'm not willing to take a risk with that much money. But my point is that therapy is great. And I'm going to encourage you to, if you need to talk with a therapist, of course do that. But go in there and direct the therapy a little bit yourself. When I started therapy 20, I guess it was like 20 years ago, maybe 21 years ago, I was reading everything I could put my hands on in terms of personal growth, and why I wanted to know why I was where I was. Because I finally realized I wasn't changing him. So I needed to figure out why I was there. Why was I staying? And that is such a critical question. Who are you? Why are you where you are? If you don't know that, guess what happens? We just keep repeating the same pattern. Because I really think that the whole point is trying to see yourself differently. Like the whole point of the experience, the whole point of our life. Oh my God, I could talk about this for days and on end. But it starts with you. And so I'm just, I became a therapist so that I could teach people, and I'm just going to offer this retreat until people start taking it, I guess, or because it's that important. Oh my gosh, 24 messages. Learning and growing. Good for you, MJ. And I understand. I know it's a commitment. It's going to be a great retreat, though. I have to tell you. It's going to be at a house in Annapolis. It's a 7-bedroom house. And so everybody's going to stay together, and it's going to be intense, like all day Friday, all day Saturday, and part of Sunday morning. There's going to be a lot of mindfulness. I'm going to teach some meditations for the people who think they can't meditate. We're going to learn and learn and learn and share and probably cry a little bit and come out with a whole toolbox that will get you started onto the next part of your journey. And for people who want to take that and make it kind of the boot camp for the therapy, they'll have so many kinds of thoughts and notes that they can take to a therapist. So yeah, it's in 3 months. There's room options from $700 to $1,500. It includes the lodging, all of the food, the retreat, everything. And if you are flying in and you need a ride to the airport, we'll make that happen. So if that sounds interesting, the link is in my bio. I will say this, I'm going to do it again. So, if it probably won't be the same house, so that changes the price a little bit. But if it's something that you want to think about, it'll probably be the last weekend of September, because that works out in my art fair schedule really well. So think about that, and just make sure your name is on my email list so that I can let you know when it happens. You can get on the email list by filling out the form that's right there. If you go to the link in my bio, and it'll take you right to the retreat page, and scroll all the way down, and there's a form you can fill out. Bye, everybody, and thanks again for all the love that you share and spread in this room. I'm really, really proud of you. Proud of us. Take care.